Hi, my name is Jen, and I basically wanted to make a video about why I think it's important that we study animation, how I feel like we should treat it with as much respect and give it as much insight as we do with live action filmmaking and other art forms in general. I love looking at films and kind of learning about when they were made, where they were made, kind of where it falls culturally relevant wise, and kind of just the technology that was made to make it, or maybe even why it was made. And I feel like animation offers so many different layers to that conversation that a lot of the wider film conversation tends to overlook. To study animation is to acknowledge its place in cinema history and to properly evaluate its achievements. So right now, animation, in my opinion, often gets pigeonholed, especially in America, as something either geared specifically at young kids, or it's kind of that adult humor, like the very raunchy kind of Family Guy, South Park, Sausage Party type humor, and it kind of leaves everybody else in the dust. Now, of course, you can argue that, you know, a lot of Disney films and just films in general are geared more towards families, but in general, through their marketing and their merchandising, you can tell that they're pretty much geared at kids. But it seems like a lot of the time in the case with animation, it kind of becomes the only thing that people see it as. It sometimes, I think, gets lost in translation. Something does, where it ends up kind of feeling like it's trivial or it's easily dismissed, and that's just not true. I recently saw a talk with Trevor Albert, who's one of the producers of Groundhog Day. He was kind of saying how comedy is kind of a really difficult thing to get people on board with, and it's not really taken as seriously in the film community. It kind of just gets seen as a bit less than, obviously, like your big period dramas and things like that. So he kind of was sympathizing with me and like the audience that he was speaking to, who were a bunch of animators and people working in the animation industry. So for me, it kind of validated how I felt about animation. For me, it's especially interesting because as an adult who likes animation, in this country, it kind of often gets met with like kind of a side eye, you know, where people kind of think you're immature, and there's all these weird stigmas around adults that just like animation, and I do not understand it. And I mean, I understand it to an extent in that I feel like it's just because people here aren't as exposed to as many different types and, again, different genres and different mediums within animation to really find something that works for them. For me, one of the things that's really interesting about animation too is how people kind of, I think, trivialize it, because in America it's this very, very heavily commercialized art form. It started out as kind of just artists dicking around to an extent, trying to find like this new platform, this new act, this new thing that they could have in their arsenal of tools, and it's kind of just become this, you know, massive cash grab. Obviously it's successful because people love these movies, they go to these movies, they do so well. So it's just very interesting to me as well, that like dynamic where they do so well and they're so widespread, but like I feel like they still get like, you know, they get sat at the kiddie table, basically. I was lucky enough while I was in university to have taken an animation history class. This class was taught by there was just a teacher in the English department at my school who's just a gigantic flipping nerd. So he just had an animation history class. For me, I'm mentioning that class because that was kind of a turning point for me in terms of analyzing these shorts and these weird, you know, foreign movies that he was showing us that I'd never heard of before, and like critically analyzing, you know, different aspects of them and taking all of this different context into consideration. I grew up watching cartoons my whole life, but sometimes you don't really think about something having a history, like the history of mathematics. Sort of going back to what I was saying before, a lot of animated films have been on those like top 10 grossing films of each year for like the last 25 years, especially if you're including films that heavily use CG or basically are animated movies, like the new Jungle Book. And to be honest, it's rare to even see a top grossing film that doesn't use any type of CG or VFX. Even in a really subtle way, like set extensions. One of the things that I also think is kind of interesting, and I kind of talked about this before, about how, you know, there's animation targeted at kids. There's clear signs of things that we show our kids and how they affect their development. You know, there's been a handful of articles that quote a study about how Harry Potter makes our kids more tolerant and like kinder people. So you want to believe that the things that we're showing them really do impact them in that way, especially now where the majority of kids under the age of 8 have access to a screen, even younger than that. I have in the description below, I'll like link an interesting article that I read about it. That being said, animation is such a powerful tool for education, not just for kids, but in general. I think another thing that really lends itself to studying animation and analyzing it is how overlapping it is with so many other art forms in terms of like art history, but also like obviously comics and graphic novels and live action filmmaking, of course, and even things that don't seem related, like the invention of the computer or film or like vaudeville theater, silent film, and just all of these different things that come into play and influence people. Like there's so many technological advances and innovations and like hacks, and from there it just also that kind of thing gives you a timestamp into that particular time period and that culture and what was going on in that country at that time. You know, where did they have the technology there yet to do this thing, or you know, were they censored by their government and they weren't allowed to make certain things, so they used a lot of like metaphors or, you know, things like that. I got another quote for you. So, animation, as an animation scholar, Paul Wells put it, "It is my contention that animation as a film language and film art is more sophisticated and flexible medium than live action film, and this offers a greater opportunity for filmmakers to be more imaginative and less conservative." I'll put that in the description because that one's a bit longer. There's just so much to cover and argue about and discuss, and I just want to do it all now, but I'm only one person. I'm super new to this, so this is just my first attempt at really trying to do this. So I will say, if you're interested in learning more about what I want to do, I actually recorded kind of like an intro podcast that's over on my website to kind of not outline, but kind of just give you a rough idea of like what I'm interested in and what I want to do. If you're interested in seeing what pops up on here from time to time, please feel free to subscribe. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you soon.